This Wall Street Journal article right here, the one whose headline reads, Activision CEO Bobby Kotick knew for years about the misconduct allegations at video game giant Activision, might be the single most influential article in the games industry in a very long time, given that this article right here greatly inspired Microsoft's purchase of Activision Blizzard for almost $70 billion. Now, Bobby Kotick will have you believe otherwise, that the culture of harassment, misconduct, abuse, and discrimination that Bobby Kotick was complacent to and that he himself actively participated in had nothing to do with the recent acquisition, but he's straight up lying if various reports are to be believed. But we'll get to that in a bit. Before then, just a quick little rundown of what happened with this purchase. In November of 2021, shortly after that Wall Street Journal article came out, Phil Spencer had expressed that he's going to evaluate Microsoft's relationship with Activision after the release of that article that exposed Bobby Kotick's negligence and complacency in all of this, and he expressed how he was deeply disturbed and troubled by the horrific events and actions. Turns out by evaluating, he meant buying Activision Blizzard outright, as announced yesterday on January 18th, 2022. Today is a historic moment, said Xbox, and the blog post itself detailed some of the franchises that be a part of the Xbox family now: Call of Duty, Warcraft, Candy Crush, Tony Hawk, Diablo, Overwatch, Spyro, Hearthstone, Guitar Hero, Crash Bandicoot, StarCraft, and more, alongside some of the companies and teams and studios that be joining the Xbox family, basically anything under the Activision Blizzard umbrella. Once the deal's complete, Activision Blizzard will no longer report to Bobby Kotick. They'll report directly to Phil Spencer, though Bobby Kotick's fate has been kept vague on an official capacity. And then on Microsoft's official news website, additional details are provided, like how the exact amount for the purchase was $68.7 billion, and the deal is expected to close in fiscal year 2023. Now, when Bobby Kotick was reached out about whether he'll be staying on after the transition is complete, after the acquisition fully goes through, he also kept it vague, saying that post-close I'll be available as needed, indicating that it's up to Microsoft and Xbox, though it seems abundantly clear that the vagueness means that there are definitely considerations about his tenure at Activision Blizzard, and the Wall Street Journal just definitively said that based on their sources, people familiar with the situation, Bobby Kotick, Activision's longtime CEO, is expected to leave after Microsoft's deal to buy the video game maker closes. Unfortunately, Bobby Kotick will not really be held accountable, and he'll be given a golden parachute to exit the company, expected to receive at least $250 million in payout for his departure, but at least the parasite will be out of the company and real progress can begin for Activision Blizzard and its employees. Now, one of the outlets that Bobby Kotick talked to was GamesBeat, through which he tried to explain why this deal happened at all, why Microsoft bought Activision, and why Activision decided to sell. And you notice that anytime harassment allegations or Activision Blizzard's awful culture is brought up, Bobby Kotick will try to downplay that as a contributor to this sale. It's all BS, as we'll see later with future articles and reportings. But GamesBeat asked, one of the questions that Bobby Kotick was asked is, why do the deal? Why is this a good time to sell? And he talks about the competition with companies, with major mega corporations like Tencent, NetEase, Sony, Google, Amazon, Apple, Facebook, Microsoft, and Netflix. And he looked at that and went, we don't have the resources to compete with them. We need to join with another giant, and that way we can have the tools and resources necessary to develop what the future has in store in terms of game development, metaverse, and all these things. And then he added that Phil call that happened to be at a time where we were getting ready to start our long-range planning process, and realizing that these were going to be issues and challenges. We had the discussion. When you start to think about all the skills we need, all the resources we need, and what they have, it made a lot of sense, and they made this offer that was incredibly attractive at 45% premium over the stock price. He basically tries to act like, oh man, the time just felt right, when we all know that had the Activision Blizzard awful culture not been exposed and had the company not received all this huge, overwhelmingly negative PR as a result of the DFVH report that exposed the awful culture, then we wouldn't be in this situation. Bobby Kotick wouldn't be considering selling the company. So him saying that it was all about, what we needed for the future, it's all BS. When GameSpeed asked about the real reason that these negotiations even began, was the harassment investigation a factor in this, as it certainly seemed to affect the stock price, Bobby Kotick tried to deny such notions by responding with the following statement. I think what affected the stock price more than the harassment allegations, is pushing out Overwatch and Diablo. He's trying to downplay just how much of a negative impact the harassment allegations and reports about the culture of harassment, abuse, discrimination, and misconduct at Activision Blizzard had on the stock price, except we can see the data for ourselves and notice that anytime a new expose released about Activision Blizzard that shined a new light on its culture, the stock price would dip. And it dipped quite a bit since all of the allegations began to come out. Not to say that the delay of Overwatch and Diablo didn't have an impact, but for him to say that that was more of a contributor than the harassment allegations and what awful optics Activision Blizzard gained throughout 2021 is just a ridiculous thing to say, though of course he knows it's a ridiculous thing to say, but he'll do anything to try to sell this more positive image about himself and his company. I should also note that the harassment allegations did contribute to both Overwatch 2 and Diablo 4 getting delayed. According to Jason Schreier's reporting here, the delays happened in large part due to changes in leadership on both teams. Overwatch 2's executive producer left by choice, and Diablo 4's director was seemingly ousted after the misconduct lawsuit. And with employees protesting and striking and being as disruptive as they can be, this has certainly clogged development pipelines for both of these games. So Overwatch 2 and Diablo 4's delay contributing to the stock price dropping is directly tied to the misconduct lawsuit and all the negative PR that came from it. And he also put the blame on this year's Call of Duty not performing as well, which, yes, was also a contributor, but the exposed harassment and discrimination and the headlines that made also had a huge impact. But Bobby Kotick is consistently trying to distance himself and his company from any of that, trying to take zero accountability. He does say that the DFVH filing and the Wall Street Journal article contributed to that, but stocks go up and down for a variety of reasons. Yeah, they played a small role, but, the stocks went up and down because of other factors. That's just a small portion of it. And notice how he actually avoids answering the question, was the harassment investigation a factor in the acquisition? He strictly talks about why the stock prices went up and down, and even then he was lying. As far as the acquisition goes, he had nothing to actually say in this response, which goes to show that he's deflecting. Bobby was then asked about his thoughts on him having to report to Phil now. What might you think about doing next once the deal is done? And his retirement, one of your thoughts? Basically asking, are you going to stay on or are you going to be leaving after the deal is finalized? And he didn't have a definitive response to say, just saying that right now my focus is staying CEO and running the business until the deal closes. Whatever role they want me to have in making sure that we integrate the business and we get a proper and smooth transition, I'm willing to do. Reporting to Phil is an easy thing to do. I'm committed to this welcoming, inclusive workplace. Having a really welcoming, inclusive workplace will be a defining characteristic of the culture of a company, says this hypocrite who, in the same breath, is trying to hide the scale of Activision's problems. The Wall Street Journal reports the awful CEO has prevented the number of firings from being revealed. This was reported fairly recently. All Bobby Kotick has been doing since the harassment allegations surfaced is impeding workplace progress and trying to bury these issues under the rug to save face, to try to mitigate damage against the company, all in the service of the corporation and its executives, never in the service of the employees, always at the expense of the employees and the ground floor workers. So him coming in here and still preaching about how a welcoming, inclusive workplace is his #1 priority, just the audacity of this man to still pretend to play sheep when we all know he's a wolf. And he preaches yet again when asked about the tough words from the Wall Street Journal article that exposed Bobby Kotick as complacent to the abuse within the company, a direct participant of it. He said, "If you have one single incident of harassment at your company, that's one too many. It's a priority for me to make sure we have the very best workplaces." Don't make me frickin' laugh. Full of PR BS and lies. Now, Bloomberg got wind of this interview and addressed it with their own research. Here's the article in question. The paragraph right here reads, "In an interview, Kotick said that the deal has nothing to do with the controversy surrounding Activision or calls for him to step down, and that Spencer reached out to him last year. A person familiar with the discussions, Bloomberg sources, who was not authorized to speak publicly, said Microsoft looked at Activision's situation, given all the negative attention and pressure on Kotick, and wondered if the beleaguered CEO would be willing to do a deal. Kotick initially didn't want to sell, according to another person familiar with the talks, and also put the word out to see if any other company would outbid Microsoft, Facebook parent company Meta being among them. But at that point, Kotick had little leverage with his board amid the ongoing public scrutiny at his company." Literally, that Wall Street Journal article that exposed Bobby Kotick's role in Activision's culture of abuse, harassment, discrimination, and misconduct was a direct catalyst to Phil Spencer reaching out to Bobby Kotick and laying out the situation. "Hey, you and the company are in a very tough spot right now. Maybe now's a good time for us to strike a deal where we, Microsoft, acquire company, and after that deal's complete, you're out, and Activision Blizzard can survive and maybe even thrive under new leadership." And Bobby Kotick unfortunately gets his golden parachute, but at the very least, he's out of Activision Blizzard, and those employees and those franchises can begin to thrive once more. There is definitely a lot more hope now surrounding that company with this acquisition, despite some of the drawbacks involved as well. But yeah, no surprise there. The snake himself, Bobby Kotick, is lying about the real reason behind this acquisition and trying to present this flowery reason that still does not acknowledge his role in some of the worst culture the games industry has seen. He's still unapologetic. He is still not taking accountability. He's still a coward and just straight up an evil person. To really drive this story home, Bloomberg followed up with another article later that same day titled "Activision Misconduct Fallout Prompted Microsoft to Pursue Deal. Game Publisher Canvassed Other Would-Be Bidders But Didn't Receive an Offer," basically discussing more about the real truth behind how this acquisition came about. Late last year, a group of Microsoft Corporation senior executives suggested that Xbox had Phil Spencer check in with the embattled CEO Bobby Kotick amidst the Wall Street Journal article expose. The goal was to offer support to a key partner and make it clear that Microsoft had concerns about the treatment of women at Activision. Another aim to ensure that if Kotick and the board were willing to sell the company, Microsoft would be well positioned to make an offer. After a few phone calls over a 2-week period, discussions evolved. Microsoft grew interested in a takeover. So this is an acquisition, a deal that happened over the course of the last 3 months, basically. One of the questions that I had is whether this was something that was in the works and then the harassment allegations accelerated the process, or whether this acquisition was directly kickstarted by the harassment allegations and by the Wall Street Journal article. Turns out it's the latter, and this acquisition came together in a relatively short amount of time. Activision Blizzard, alongside Bobby Kotick, with optics and PR devolving further, were in a tight spot and had not much of a choice, perhaps, but to take this lucrative offer. And this Bloomberg article seems to confirm that when Spencer circulated that internal email saying that Microsoft was evaluating all aspects of our relationship with Activision Blizzard, he was directly referring to a merger approach. Obviously, that was kept hidden and a secret behind the scenes, but it would seem as though this was the idea that Phil Spencer had in mind when he said he was evaluating that relationship. That's when the idea cropped up. That's when this became a serious consideration. Kotick and the board weren't sold on Microsoft as the acquirer initially. Activision made calls to try to find other interested parties like Facebook parent company Meta Platforms Inc., but eventually, while Microsoft picked up on Activision's hesitations and backed off, telling the game publisher was happy to remain partners. I mean, this kind of goes to show that Microsoft at the end of the day is still a corporation who is still willing to partner with companies in scummy situations, like a leader, a CEO who knew about harassment allegations and the abusive and discrimination-infused culture and did nothing about it and was a direct participant of it. Microsoft was still willing to partner with Activision, but ultimately Activision came back to the table and both companies' teams worked through the holidays to get the deal done. And at least now, Bobby Kotick is likely to no longer be a part of Activision Blizzard, and I feel like, with all said and done, this is going to pave the road for a far better future for Activision Blizzard, and things could have just played out a lot worse or a lot more slowly without this acquisition. I think this is going to help accelerate improvements of Activision's culture and improvements to quality standards that have fallen over the years. Jason Schreier chimed in on this Bloomberg article, specifically noting how Bobby Kotick has always cared deeply about appearances. I imagine it was tremendously important to him that he appeared to be leaving on his own terms. He wasn't pushed out. Activision's issues had nothing to do with the sale. He just felt like it was time. Kotick's response here is telling. He doesn't want history to show that he sold the company he spent 30 years running because of a misconduct scandal. No, it was because his employees couldn't ship Overwatch 2 and Diablo 4 on time. It was because COD had an off year. The guy's just so pathetic and pitiful that he is still trying to save face during a situation where the world knows that he's a scumbag. The world knows that he's evil. The world knows that he let all of this transpire. The world already sees the real face of Bobby Kotick, and he's still trying to put on the face of an angel, like he cares and like he's all about the employees and like he's all about inclusivity and like the harassment allegations and the exposés on Activision's culture had nothing to do with all of this, with Microsoft approaching them about the acquisition and with Bobby Kotick's eventual departure that has not been officially admitted yet. And Bloomberg isn't the only source. The Wall Street Journal also relayed that based on their own sources, after a Wall Street Journal article in November reported that longtime chief executive Bobby Kotick knew about allegations of employees' misconduct. That was kind of what lit the fuse for this acquisition. That was what provided the catalyst for Microsoft's gaming head Phil Spencer to approach Mr. Kotick about a takeover soon after. Mr. Kotick was cool to the idea until Microsoft offered him a graceful exit, once again emphasizing that Bobby Kotick cares about his image, which is already ruined, but he's still trying to like maneuver his way around, trying to save face. It's again just pathetic and pitiful. The time for a graceful exit has long passed, but I guess Microsoft has to pretend and kind of go along with this to close the deal. Suddenly, Microsoft executives are saying stuff like how they're grateful for Activision Blizzard CEO Bobby Kotick's commitment to real change. Please. Bobby Kotick cares so much about public image that this Wall Street Journal article reports that at one point, Kotick was eager to change the public narrative about the company by purchasing news outlets like Kotaku and PC Gamer. And while we haven't gotten official confirmation when Kotaku and PC Gamer were reached out about this, they declined to comment. Interesting, because if this isn't a true story, you'd think it'd be easy to just say, no, that didn't happen. He basically tried to pull a Jeff Bezos where he bought the Washington Post, and shortly after, all of a sudden, we started seeing headlines like, think twice before changing the tax rules to soak billionaires. The smartest way to make the rich pay is not a wealth tax. The billionaire space race benefits the rest of us. Really, again, just pathetic, desperate moves in a selfish attempt to save face with zero concerns for the damage that he has done to his employees and his company. Just a scumbag all around. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is everything you need to know about the latest developments surrounding this Microsoft acquisition of Activision Blizzard, Bobby Kotick's reaction to all of this, and what we know about the circumstances. These are my takes. Let me know in the comments below what your thoughts and opinions are on everything, and to be further updated on all things gaming news, reviews, and discussions, stay tuned right here on Young Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Young out.